Hello everyone, this is Warhawk Beyond 2040 and welcome to a very special edition of the Jazz Albums Review Series. And April 15th, 2017 marks 7 years ago on this day that we sadly lost legendary guitarist Allan Holdsworth at the age of 70 years old due to heart disease. And today's special edition is dedicated to the memory of Allan Holdsworth, who, in my opinion, was one of the greatest guitar players that ever lived and a pioneer in the legato style of guitar playing and a true influential and inspiration for all future guitar players. And for today's special edition, I'm going to be taking a look at Allan Holdsworth's solo catalogue of live albums. Now, for those of you who remember, a while ago, I did a special edition of this series dedicated to Allan Holdsworth, where I talked about Allan Holdsworth's solo catalogue of studio albums. And this is a follow up to that one, where I'm going to be taking a look at Allan Holdsworth's live recordings, which consists of 11 live albums. And as always, I am going to be talking about each album individually, and I'll be choosing which one I think is the best one. Not an easy challenge, very difficult to choose the best Allan Holdsworth live album. They're all good, they're all sound fantastic, well produced. Everything about it is to the point of near perfection. And as someone who has seen Allan Holdsworth live, I can honestly tell you, as great as Allan Holdsworth sounds in the studio, and don't get me wrong, his solo studio albums are equally as brilliant. There is no greater experience from a listening point of view and witnessing the man himself in person than hearing Allan Holdsworth live. He really took his guitar playing to a new level on the live stage, and you have to really witness Holdsworth in person to know what I'm talking about. And for those of you who have seen Allan Holdsworth live in person, you know what I'm talking about. Everything about him, from the way he played, his technique, his approach, scales, chords, the sound he was able to generate, the atmospheric soundscapes, everything about Allan Holdsworth, his solos that made your jaw drop and made your hair stand up. This guy could do it all. This guy was the whole package live, and wow, his guitar playing was virtually almost to the point of godlike, and it was like watching a god before your very eyes. And I've seen many unbelievable iconic guitarists, the likes of Pat Metheny, Scott Henderson, Al Di Meola, John McLaughlin, Mike Stern, to name a few. And as amazing as those guys are, and they're the absolute best in the world, there was nobody, as far as live performances are concerned, that did it better than Allan Holdsworth. He was just top notch. There was just nobody quite like this guy. He was just in a league of his own. So, with that all said, let's get straight into it. We're going to start with the first live Allan Holdsworth album, which came out in 1987, and this one is IOU Live. So, IOU was a band that Allan Holdsworth had featuring singer Paul Williams from Tempest, bassist Jimmy Johnson, and drummer Chad Wackerman. And nothing against Paul Williams, he was a phenomenal singer. I'm not too keen on vocals with Allan Holdsworth. I prefer to hear just the man himself playing his guitar. But this was a fantastic live performance from Allan Holdsworth's IOU band. And, you know, Holdsworth played with a lot of different singers, but I thought the way that Paul Williams and Holdsworth, the vocals and guitars blended together, they matched up really, really well, and they were a great front line. They really brought out the best in each other. And when you've got a rhythm section consisting of Jimmy Johnson and Chad Wackerman, you really can't go wrong. You've got the absolute best in the world. And IOU were a great band. They were a great live band. So let's have a look, shall we? And there is Paul Williams. So this was a concert that took place in Japan in 1985 on the back of the Metal Fatigue album that came out the previous year in 1984. And the band IOU was formed in 1982, and they would go on to record the self-titled album IOU, which was an Allan Holdsworth solo album. And Allan Holdsworth and Paul Williams were originally members of a progressive power rock band called Tempest back in the 1970s. And these two together worked very well. I thought they had great chemistry. Paul Williams was a great singer. He had more of a blues background, whereas Holdsworth had more of a jazzier background. But I thought the two styles together blended very well, and they had great chemistry and they had a very deep rapport. And all due respect to Paul Williams, but I kind of feel that the vocals got in the way of Holdsworth's guitar playing a little bit, because me, as a guitar fan, I much rather just hear the man play his guitar. I don't really like vocals because I sometimes feel they get in the way, especially when you got a real burner like Allan Holdsworth. So I just kind of feel like the vocals were a little bit too much in the way, but still a great band, great listening experience, and as I said, IOU, a great live band. I thought these guys worked very well together, but me personally, I just prefer to hear Holdsworth playing his guitar. Just a personal preference, that's all. So a lot of the material that's featured on here are from the IOU and Metal Fatigue albums, and most of the compositions are either written and composed by Holdsworth or co-composed with Paul Williams, and there's also one contribution from Jerry Brown. But it's a great live album. As I said, the four musicians individually, they just sound great. But for me, when I listen closely to it, I love what's going on with Holdsworth, Johnson, and Wackerman. I think that's where it's more at for me, in my opinion. So tracks we got are Road Games, White Line, Panic Station, Letters of Mark, Material Real, Metal Fatigue, Where Is One, The Things You See, and Was There Something. Great live album, but as I said, I wouldn't consider this a clunker, but I could just do without the vocals because, I know Holdsworth worked with a number of different singers over the course of his career, but for me, I just prefer to hear the man himself playing his guitar. That's just me. So the standout tracks are Road Games, Letters of Mark, Material Real, Metal Fatigue, The Things You See, and Was There Something. But great live album and some great guitar playing from Holdsworth, great drumming from Chad Wackerman, great bass work from Jimmy Johnson, who is just rock solid on this live recording, and Paul Williams, a great singer as well. And he's got a very powerful voice. And as I said, he works very well with Holdsworth's guitar lines, which, quite frankly, I would have trouble keeping up with if I was a singer. But Paul Williams, to his credit, he not only keeps up with Holdsworth, but he actually hangs with him. Not many singers could do that, unless you're John Wetton, who really could hang with Allan Holdsworth and more than held his own with someone of his caliber. So there you have it. IOU live. Great live recording. Feel the vocals kind of get in the way a little bit, and I just would have preferred if this was an instrumental album, but still a great listening experience nonetheless. So there you have it. IOU live. So we move on to the next one, which came out in 2002, and this for me could very well be my favourite Allan Holdsworth live album. And this one is All Night Wrong. So this album here is a special Japanese edition, and this production is 10 times better than IOU Live. Bit more modern, bit more up to date, and it just sounds absolutely phenomenal. There are a couple of tracks on here that have never been recorded to this day, and yeah, this is Allan Holdsworth at his best, and no vocals, just Allan Holdsworth with his band playing to the fullest and showcased. And yeah, this is absolutely fantastic, I think. So we've got Allan Holdsworth on guitar, Jimmy Johnson on bass, and Chad Wackerman on drums. Fantastic live album, and could very well be my favourite Allan Holdsworth live recording. He has never sounded better than he does here. I just think this is a phenomenal live recording. So let's have a look, shall we? There he is. So all of the compositions are written and composed by Allan Holdsworth. And there is, as Holdsworth would say, the chaps. Now, this was a concert that took place in 2002 at a small club called the Roppongi Pit Inn. Great, great little place. You know, Holdsworth in his career always preferred to play much smaller venues, and I can understand and see where Holdsworth was coming from. You know, he felt a bit more safer in a much more closed environment, and I feel like with a guy like Holdsworth playing in smaller venues, it's lots more intimate, in my opinion. So there is the chaps again, and there's some production notes. Most of it is in Japanese anyway. So tracks we got here is Lanyard Loop, The Things You See, Alpha Rays Alien, Funnels, Zone, Water on the Brain Part 2, Above and Below, and Gaslamp Blues. Fantastic live album, and as I said, could very well be my favourite Allan Holdsworth live album. So standout tracks for me are Lanyard Loop, Funnels, Zone, which has got a great Chad Wackerman drum solo to kick things off, and he's just an absolute beast on this album. Water on the Brain Part 2, and a very nice atmospheric extended version of Above and Below from the 16 Men of Tame recording, which for me is my all-time favourite Allan Holdsworth studio album, and Gaslamp Blues. But great live performance from a magnificent trio and a great collection of songs from top to bottom. And for me, as I said, this could very well be not only my favourite Allan Holdsworth live album, I think this could very well be his best one. I just think it's a fantastic live album that really showcases what Allan Holdsworth is all about, and you really get to hear his guitar playing on full display. So there you have it, Allan Holdsworth, All Night Wrong. So we move on to the next live album, and this one came out in 2004, and this one is called Then. So this is a live quartet recording, and the live performance took place in Tokyo in 1990, and the band features Allan Holdsworth on guitar and baritone guitar, Steve Hunt on keyboards, Gary Husband on drums, and Jimmy Johnson on bass. And a lot of the material that's featured on here are group improvisations, tracks from Sand, Atavkron, and early work versions of material that would end up on Hard Hat area, which would be recorded and released 3 years later with this very same band, minus Jimmy Johnson and with bassist Scully Severinsen. And I've always said from the beginning that I've always felt that Allan Holdsworth sounded at his best in a trio environment because I always felt that his guitar playing sounded and shined the best. But there's something to him when you add keyboards to the mix because it not only brings out a different side to his guitar playing, but it also allows the keyboards to cover a lot of the synthax solos, which was an instrument that Allan Holdsworth played very heavily throughout the mid 80s all the way up to the early 2000s. So to hear the keyboards play the synthax solos is a nice change of pace and a nice switch up of the dynamic. And the keyboards really make the band sound more thicker. It makes everything sound more better, and it just really beefs up the sound. And as I said, it's a different band, when you have Holdsworth and a keyboard player in the mix. And Holdsworth, as we all know, has played with some of the greatest keyboard players of all time, from Alan Pasqua, obviously, to Steve Hunt, to Gordon Beck, and of course, the one and only powerhouse metal keyboardist Derek Sherinian. Holdsworth really works well with keyboard players. And of course, last but surely not least, Eddie Jobson from UK. And of course, Carl Jenkins and Mike Ratledge in Soft Machine. So Holdsworth is no stranger to keyboard players. So let's have a look, shall we? So we got some notes here, some photographs from the tour, and some more notes here as well. And tracks we got here are Zone 1, Protocosmos, White Line, Atavtron, Zone 2, Pudwud, House of Mirrors, Non-Brewed Condiments, and Zone 3. Great collection of songs from start to finish, great live performance, and great guitar playing from Allan Holdsworth, great drumming from Gary Husband, rock solid bass work from Jimmy Johnson, and unbelievable keyboard playing from Steve Hunt. An excellent band. Standout tracks for me are Atavkron, Zone 2, Pudwud, Protocosmos, and House of Mirrors and Non-Brewed Condiments. Great stuff here, great performance from everyone, and Holdsworth, he just sounds fantastic no matter what environment you put him in. He just makes everything and everyone around him just sound amazing, and that is a true testament to Allan Holdsworth and his jaw-dropping guitar playing. So there you have it, Allan Holdsworth, Then. Great live album, and not an easy one to find, but if you can pick it up, highly recommended. It's really good. So we move on to the next live album, which came out in 2009, and this is a double live recording, and it's a tribute to the legendary drummer Tony Williams, and this one is called Blues for Tony. So Blues for Tony is a double live recording featuring Tony Williams' lifetime members Allan Holdsworth and Alan Pasqua, with the powerhouse rhythm section consisting of bassist Jimmy Haslip from the Yellow Jackets and longtime collaborator drummer Chad Wackerman. And a lot of the material that's featured on here is from Tony Williams' lifetime recordings. Now, I was very lucky to catch this tour. This band played in London in 2007 at the Queen Elizabeth Hall in London, and it was the first Allan Holdsworth concert in many years. He hadn't played in the UK for quite a long time, and to me, it was like the return of a hero after many years of absence. Holdsworth hadn't missed a single step. He still sounded as fantastic as always. Alan Pasqua, great keyboard player. Jimmy Haslett, what more can you say? One of the greatest bass players of all time. And Chad Wackerman, enough said, one of the greatest drummers in the world. And this was an amazing band. And I was very lucky to catch these guys live. They just sounded incredible. So on disc one, we've got Blues for Tony, the fifth, which is a composition by Chad Wackerman, which would end up on his solo album many years later called Dreams, Nightmares and Improvisations, which also features Allan Holdsworth. It Must Be Jazz, which is a group effort by Holdsworth, Pasqua, Haslip and Wackerman. We've got Fred, guitar intro, Pudwad, and then on disc two we got Looking Glass to Jackie, George, and Tad, San Michelle, Protocosmos, and Red Alert. Excellent stuff here. So let's have a look. So there they are. And there they are. Tremendous live album by these guys. So the standout tracks for me on disc one are The Fifth, Fred, Guitar Intro, and Pudwad. And the standout tracks for me on disc two are San Michelle, Protocosmos, and Red Alert. But wow, this is a really great live performance and a fitting tribute to one of the greatest and most iconic drummers of all time, the one and only Tony Williams. He would be very, very proud. And these guys not only take the Tony Williams lifetime compositions, but they really put their own spin on it and just breathe new life into it. And to me, they just sound like brand new songs. You know, they did a fantastic job, and Chad Wackerman did a great job channeling the spirits of the legendary Tony Williams, but still sounding like his own man. Fantastic stuff here. So there you have it. Blues for Tony by Allan Holdsworth, Alan Pasqua, Jimmy Haslip, and Chad Wackerman. Fantastic live performance and highly recommended to check out. It's a really good live performance. And there's also a DVD as well, if you can find that, of this performance. It's really, really good. So there you have it. Blues for Tony. Excellent. So we move on to the next live album, and this one came out in 2019, and this one is also a CD and DVD set, and this one is called Warsaw Summer Jazz Days 98. So this is a Allan Holdsworth trio live recording featuring bassist Dave Carpenter, who we also sadly lost, and drummer Gary Novak. And a lot of the material that's featured on here would end up on the 16 Men of Tame recording many years later. And as I said at the beginning, 16 Men of Tame, my all-time favourite Allan Holdsworth studio album, and a real nice treat to hear those tracks played as a work in progress years before they were ever recorded. And to me, they don't really sound much different. I mean, they take on a life of its own, and it's really cool to hear material played before they were even recorded. It's a real joy to hear. And as great as the DVD sounds, I think the CD sounds even better, in my opinion. I think there's some really great stuff. So let's have a look. So we got some notes from Gary Novak about Allan Holdsworth and Dave Carpenter, and a little bit about the live concerts. And there is some more sleeve notes and a tribute to Holdsworth. And there's a real nice, cool shot of the man himself. Great stuff there. So we've got the 16 Men of Tame, Looking Glass, Above and Below, Water on the Brain Part 2, Material Unreal, 0274, Letters of Mark, Texas, and Protocosmos. Great, great stuff here. Absolutely amazing. And Gary Novak, you know, I love Chad Wackerman, but Gary Novak is a monster on this album. He really cooks up a storm. And Dave Carpenter, rock solid bass player, very laid back, and he played acoustic bass, on the 16 Men of Tain album, but it's a real nice treat to hear him playing electric bass because I've never really known him to play electric bass that much, but he sounds absolutely amazing here. And Allan Holdsworth, what more can you say? He's the man, and he has never sounded better than he does here. So the standout tracks for me are the 16 Men of Tain, Above and Below, 0274, and Texas, and Water on the Brain Part 2. Excellent live performance, and all due respect to the trio with Jimmy Johnson and Chad Wackerman, which is legendary, but I think this trio with Dave Carpenter and Gary Novick could very well be my all-time favourites, and they produced my all-time favourite Allan Holdsworth studio album, The 16 Men of Tame, so win-win all round as far as I'm concerned. So great live performance, and as I said, DVD's great, but the CD sounds even better. So there you have it. Allan Holdsworth, Warsaw Summer Jazz Days 98, CD and DVD. Tremendous stuff. So we move on to the next live album, which came out in 2020, and it's also a CD and DVD set. And this one is Frankfurt 86. So this is a live quartet recording, and this features Allan Holdsworth playing the Synfax, which was an important instrument that he dabbled in during the mid 80s all the way up to the early to mid 2000s. And in a way, it's kind of like a guitar synthesizer and operating in the role of a keyboard player. So, really nice treat to see Allan Holdsworth playing the Synfax, and the thing with the Synfax in the hands of Holdsworth, it sounds like Holdsworth. It's just another instrument. And I know Lee Ritner dabbled in the Synfax during the mid 80s, but I feel Holdsworth really made a thing out of it. And to me, it's like Holdsworth was either playing like a pipe sort of sound, or he's playing like a piano sort of sound, or he'll just create all these different atmospheric textural sounds. And wow, it just sounded incredible in Holdsworth's hands. And when you heard him play the Synfax, you knew straight away it was him because such a distinct sound on the Synfax. So this is a live quartet recording that took place in Frankfurt, Germany in 1986, and it features Allan Holdsworth on guitar, Gary Husband on drums, Jimmy Johnson on bass, and Kei Akagi on keyboards. Now, Gary Husband and Jimmy Johnson, of course, as we all know, were longtime collaborators of Allan Holdsworth. Kei Akagi, not very well known to me. I believe he played keyboards with Al Di Meola's band during the Soaring for a Dream tour, or may have been the Tiramisu tour. I'm not too sure, but I seem to remember him playing with Al Di Meola during the mid 80s, but not very well known to me, but an amazing keyboard player and works very well within this band. And as I said earlier, keyboards add another dimension and bring out a different side to Allan Holdsworth's guitar playing. And this would be around the time that Allan Holdsworth first started playing the Synfax. He would introduce the instruments on the Atavkon album. So this is coming off the back of that album. So this is from that tour. So let's have a look. So we got some notes from Gary Husband, and we've also got, as Holdsworth always likes to say, a nice picture of the chaps. So tracks we got here are Three Sheets to the Wind, Letters of Mark, Tokyo Dream, Looking Glass, Tavkron, Non-Brewed Condiments, White Line, Shallow Sea, Devil Take the Hindmost. And as I said before, as much as I like the DVD, I think the CD sounds even better, in my opinion. Gary Husband, for those of you who know already, an amazing drummer and a great keyboard player as well. He's all over this album. He's just amazing on the drums. Jimmy Johnson, a rock solid and reliable bass player. And Kei Akagi, although he's the least known out of this quartet. He shines really well on this album. You know, he really plays very well with these guys. And Allan Holdsworth, what more can you say? He always sounds incredible, and he really performs double duty. He's playing guitar and he's also playing synthwax as well. So, you know, he really got his work cut out for him. But you know what? Holdsworth never flinched once. He's a man's man and he just does what he does. So, standout tracks for me are Letters of Marque, Tokyo Dream, Tavcrom, Shallow Sea, and Devil Take the Hindmost. Very enjoyable live performance, and you know, I still stand by what I said. I prefer Holsworth in the trio environment, but this is still a great band, but just, you know, different. As I said, when you add keyboards to the band, especially where Allan Holsworth is concerned, it takes on a life of its own. So it's tremendous stuff here. So there you have it. Allan Holdsworth, Frankfurt 86, CD, DVD. Excellent stuff. Really enjoyable and really good to see Holsworth playing synthwax during the mid 80s, because I don't think there's many films of Holsworth playing that instrument, at least none that I've come across. So, nice little piece of history in our hands. So, there you have it. Allan Holdsworth, Frankfurt 86. Tremendous stuff. So, we move on to the next live album, which came out in 2021. And this one is also a CD and DVD set. And this one is called Leverkusen 97. So this is Allan Holdsworth in the trio environment once again, this time with bassist Dave Carpenter and longtime collaborator and drummer Chad Wackerman. And a lot of the material that's featured on here is mostly 16 Men of Tame material before it was even recorded. And there's also some material from Hard Hat Area and IOU and other Allan Holdsworth solo recordings. And there's also an exclusive Chad Wackerman interview on the DVD. So tracks we got here are The 16 Men of Tame, Looking Glass, Above and Below, Water on the Brain Part 2, Zone, Material, Real, Letters of Marque 0274, Texas, House of Mirrors, and Protocosmos. Great live album. And just as I said it before, DVD sounds great, but the CD sounds even better. It's just my opinion, really. So there is the chaps, as Holsworth always says. And there's some sleeve notes here as well. And there is the genius at work himself. And there's also some cool shots of the band too. So excellent stuff here. So the standout tracks for me are The 16 Men of Tame, Above and Below, Letters of Marque 0274, Texas, and House of Mirrors. I think the musician that shines the brightest on this live performance is actually Chad Wackerman. You know, his drumming is all over the music, and he's got such a big sound, and I think he's the standout man of this trio. Dave Carpenter, rock solid bass player. Holdsworth, enough said really. Holdsworth always sounds good, even if he would probably disagree and say no, he sounded terrible. But he's the man. You know, all geniuses are like that. They always think they sound terrible, but to us, they sound amazing. And Holdsworth is no exception. He just sounds great no matter what. Even if he was to say that was his worst playing ever, we all know better. Holdsworth, you know, he never had a bad day, even if he said he did. And he just sounds great as always. You know, great burning guitar playing as only Holdsworth can deliver. He's all over this album. But as I said, I think Chad Wackerman really stood out on this live performance. His drumming was just so deep and so powerful. So there you have it. Allan Holdsworth, Leverkusen 97. Great stuff here. So we move on to the next live album, which also came out in 2021, and it's a CD and DVD as well. And this one is Leverkusen 2010. Now, this trio featuring Chad Wackerman and Ernest Tibbs I was lucky to catch this band, and they sounded absolutely amazing. Ernest Tibbs, great bass player, played with Greg Howe. He's currently a member of Simon Phillips Protocol. He is a great bass player, and he's very different to Jimmy Johnson and Dave Carpenter, but very much his own man with his own style and his own way of playing. And he matches up really well with Holdsworth. Holdsworth, what more can you say? Allan Holdsworth's the man. That's all you need to say, really. He sounds fantastic, and the picture quality on the DVD is incredible. And as I said before, DVD sounds great, but the CD sounds even better. That's my opinion. I'm sticking to it. So let's have a look. There's some sleeve notes there. There's a cool shot of Holdsworth. And great shots of the chaps, as Holdsworth always says. So nice shot of the band as well. So tracks we got here is Leave Them On, Fred, Water on the Brain Part 2, Madam Vintage, which originally appeared on Softworks Abracadabra, and that was more of a guitar drum jam with the late great John Marshall, which leads into Above and Below. The Things You See When You Haven't Got Your Gun, Material Real, The Fifth, which, as I mentioned earlier, appeared on Chad Wackerman's Dreams, Nightmares and Improvisations album, Letters of Mark, and Protocosmos. Great live performance and really strong and packs a hell of a punch. And Chad Wackerman sounds incredible. Him and Ernest Tibbs, they work really well together as a rhythm section. And Holdsworth, he just burns and burns red hot as only Holdsworth can. So standout tracks for me are Madam Vintage, Water on the Brain Part 2, Above and Below, The Fifth, and Letters of Mark. Great live performance and some exclusive interviews with Ernest Tibbs and Chad Wackerman. Excellent stuff here, and one that I often go to when I want to watch an Allan Holdsworth live performance. I always tend to go to this one quite a bit. It's a very, very good live performance, and the picture quality is just top notch. So there you have it. Allan Holdsworth, Leverkusen 2010. Tremendous stuff. And so we move on to the next live album, which came out in 2022. And this one just kind of slipped under the radar for me. I had no idea that this one even came out. And I wasn't entirely sure if there was a physical release of this Allan Holdsworth live album, but I'm really glad there is, and I'm really happy to have this one in my hand. And this features the same lineup as the double Blues for Tony live recording that came out in 2009, and this one is Protocosmos. So, as I mentioned, this features the same band that performed and toured the tribute to Tony Williams, and this features Allan Holdsworth on guitar, Alan Pasqua on keyboards, Chad Wackerman on drums, and Jimmy Haslip on bass. And this album was produced by Jimmy Haslip, Alan Pasqua, and Chad Wackerman as a tribute to the legendary Allan Holdsworth. And this mostly features material by Tony Williams' Lifetime band, and there's also an Alan Pasqua and Allan Holdsworth composition as well. But all of the compositions were written by Holdsworth and Pasqua when they were part of Tony Williams' Lifetime band back in the 1970s. So let's have a look. So there is the great band there. Holdsworth, Haslip, Wackerman, and Pasqua. Great band who I saw live. Unbelievable. So tracks we got here are Protocosmos, Blues for Tony, Looking Glass, Solo Guitar, Pudwad, Piano Solo, San Michel, It Must Be Jazz, and Red Alert. The excellent performance, and it's kind of like an alternative take on the gig that This band performed on the 2009 Blues for Tony double live recording. It's from that tour, but just the tracks are played slightly different to that album, but still great performances nonetheless. Holdsworth sounds great as always, as does Alan Pasqua. Chad Wackerman and Jimmy Haslip together are a monster rhythm section, but they also sound excellent individually. And standout tracks for me are solo guitar, piano solo, San Michelle, Blues for Tony, Red Alerts, and Protocosmos. But a great collection of songs from start to finish. Everyone on this album shines really brightly, and the standout man is, of course, the one and only Allan Holdsworth. But Chad Wackerman and Jimmy Johnson and Alan Pasqua, they are far from slouches. They all sound amazing in their own right. And what an incredible band this was. Unbelievable. One of the best live bands I've ever seen, led by Allan Holdsworth. Excellent stuff. So there you have it. Allan Holdsworth, Protocosmos. Tremendous stuff. Not an easy album to find, but highly recommend you look up this album on Blue Canoe Records, and you'll probably find a copy of it there if you can. Highly recommended for all Allan Holdsworth fans. So there you have it, Protocosmos. So we move on to the next live album, which came out in 2022, and this is also a CD and DVD set, and this one is called Jaris Jazz Festival 2014. So this is a live trio recording featuring drummer and longtime collaborator Gary Husband and bassist Jimmy Haslip, and the DVD features an exclusive interview with Jimmy Haslip about this live performance. And what's more can you say? As I said already, Allan Holdsworth is right at home in the trio environment, and I can't think of two better individuals to play in this situation with Holdsworth than Gary Husband and Jimmy Haslip, who both sound not only incredible as a rhythm section, but also as individual musicians. They are just absolutely rocking. And Holdsworth, he just sounds incredible as always. So let's have a look. There is the band. Nice shot of the chaps. And a great shot of the band as well. Excellent stuff here. So, tracks we got here are Texas, Fred, Water on the Brain Part 2, Devil Take the Hindmost, Gas Lamp Blues, Above and Below, Leave Them On, Letters of Mark, Red Alert, The Unmerry-Go-Round Part 5. Excellent live performance. Haslip, rock solid bass player with some funky bass lines. Gary Husband, an excellent drummer, and he's just all over this live performance, and some great drum solos from him as well. And Allan Holdsworth, he just sounds incredible as always, and always constantly refining his sound and constantly reinventing himself, never repeating the same things twice. And he's just an absolute beast on stage. And as I said at the beginning, as great as Allan Holdsworth sounds in the studio, and he's great, there's no better experience than Allan Holdsworth live. He's just on another level as far as I'm concerned, and he's right at home in this situation, in this environment, with two heavyweights in Gary Husband and Jimmy Haslip. So standout tracks for me are Water on the Brain, Above and Below, Leave Them On, Letters of Mark, Red Alerts, and the Unmerry-Go-Round Part 5. Excellent live performance and very enjoyable, and this performance really packs a punch and a true showcase of three top-notch musicians at the top of their game. And it doesn't get any better than Allan Holdsworth, Jimmy Haslip, and Gary Husband, a real power trio as far as I'm concerned. So there you have it, Jaris Jazz Festival 2014. And as I said, as great as the DVD sounds, the CD sounds even better. It's unbelievable. Highly recommended. Got to check it out. It's really good. So there you have it. Jaris Jazz Festival 2014. Excellent stuff. So, which Allan Holdsworth live album out of all 11 live recordings do I consider to be his best one ever? Is the best one? Well, it's a hard one. This was a difficult challenge for me. They're all great, all different, but there's only one, and it's the one that I go back to the most, and I consider it to be the best Allan Holdsworth live album ever, and that is All Night's Wrong. I just think it's a fantastic live album, great production, great sounding, great playing, great choice of material. Everyone just sounds amazing on this live album. For me, this is the best Allan Holdsworth live album of all time. And Holdsworth sounds great as always. Chad Wackerman, he's a beast on the drums. Jimmy Johnson, rock solid bass player, and they just make a great rhythm section, and they have a great rapport with Allan Holdsworth. And to me, as far as I'm concerned, as far as trios are concerned, this was the best Allan Holdsworth trio ever. I thought these three together was just pure magic. I love all of the other trios, Dave Carpenter and Gary Novak. That's up there for me. It's probably my favorite, but if I had to choose the iconic Allan Holdsworth trio, I have to go with Holdsworth, Johnson, and Wackerman. And this album is a prime example of that trio and a brilliant showcase. So, if I was to recommend one Allan Holdsworth live album, it would definitely be All Night's Wrong. I think this is an excellent live recording and the perfect showcase for three outstanding musicians. So, there you have it. Allan Holdsworth, All Night's Wrong, my all time favourite Allan Holdsworth live album, and one that I consider to be his best one ever. So that's going to be it from me. I am going to wrap this up now. What's your favourite Allan Holdsworth live album? Is it IOU Live, All Night's Wrong, Then, Live in Japan 1984, Warsaw Summer Jazz Days 98, Frankfurt 86, Leverkusen 97, Leverkusen 2010, Protocosmos, or Jaris Jazz Festival 2014? There's no right or wrong answer. We all have our favourite Allan Holdsworth live albums. You know what to do, guys. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, leave your thoughts and comments down below, and I will see all of you next time for another edition of the Jazz Albums Review Series. And I just want to quickly say a special thank you to Allan Holdsworth for all of the excellent music you have given us for so many years. Hard to believe that it's already been 7 years since Allan Holdsworth passed away, and he is dearly missed by everyone, including myself. And his legacy and his memory and his music will live on for many generations to come. So until next time, take care, everybody, and stay safe. And once again, as always, much appreciated. Thanks for listening, and rest in peace, Allan Holdsworth. You will always and forever be the greatest guitar player that ever lived.